All right. Well, the golden calf is what I ended up keep coming back to. Understanding the golden calf is really important. And when I'm reading a bunch of commentaries about what all this means, they seem to interject a whole lot of stuff that isn't there. And so it's hard to know how much of it to believe in. But there is a lot of it that brings a lot of questions up for sure. First thing I want to talk about is Exodus 20:23. And I'm using the English Standard Version. And the reason why I'm using the English Standard Version is because they have this particular phrase in there that doesn't appear in some of the other translations. For instance, in Exodus 20:23, it says, "You shall not make gods of silver to be with me, nor shall you make for yourselves gods of gold." In some of the translations, it makes it seem like the Jewish people are worshiping pagan gods, and
Yeah.
that's what I've always kind of thought, and I think that's what a lot of people think. But if you read it closer with the conversation that Moses has with Aaron about the situation, he says that they were looking for a substitute for Moses because Moses went up onto Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. And they thought the 40 days and 40 nights began like when he was telling them that. So it was like the 39th day. And they start whining around going, "Where's Moses at? We don't know what's become of him." And then they want Aaron to make them a god that can go before them. And it says something along the line. First of all, it says that he made it with graven tools. But then when Moses asks him about it, he says he just threw the gold in the fire and out came a calf. So it looks like Aaron's lying to Moses. But, if you listen to this, rabbis, it makes it, they have a lot of explanation that I don't see right in the scripture. But it's interesting to me that it says to be with me.
Says what?
It says right here to be with me. So they weren't making a god they weren't making a pagan god. They were making a way to, they wanted to be with God, with the God. And if you look at I'm just going to skip down. I'm not going in the order that I planned on going in, but since I'm talking directly to you, I'm going to skip down to right here. It says, here in Leviticus, it has another example of it. "Turn ye not to idols, nor make yourselves molten gods." And gods over and over is referred to in the what do you call it, where they have these labels, what are they called,
The
uh,
I don't know what
I
you're
can't
looking
think of
for
the name
there.
of the book. I'm gonna have to jump over here to our reference library. What do they call it? The Strong's Concordance.
Oh,
Yeah, so this is out of the Strong's Concordance, Leviticus 9:19:4. Do not make yourselves molten gods. Well, if you click on that, it'll bring up Elohim here, and that's the same God. That's the capital G God, the one that created the heavens and the earth, the one that created Adam and Eve.
yeah.
And so I'm not sure why sometimes it said, like right here, it says gods. But when you click on it in Hebrew, it's the same word they used for God. So I'm not sure what possessed them to write the word gods. Because that's not the Hebrew word. Now, if you refer to it in plural form, it means It means pagan gods. Right here, see, it says root word plural form 433. But that's not what this says. It says 430.
Yeah, that's where it starts getting kind of interesting, trying to figure out the language. And I was thinking about that today earlier, that we can sit there and we can take one of these words, from the original language and use 7 or 8 or 10 words to describe that one word.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And
what
so
I'm
really
looking at
getting
too.
to and then we've talked about primitive root words and everything, and really getting to the root of what these words mean is the difficult thing. But even so, if you take all these translations that we have, that we read, they all still make sense. They can make sense, but you still have to think about them, but they all end up with the same message as far as the Bible goes, it seems like to me. That's kind of really the amazing thing about the language part of it.
Yeah, like Elohim can also mean judge.
Yeah, right.
So, well, it just gives it a even more rich context. I think that's why some of the rabbis that I've listened to, they seem to have like a whole dramatization of the story
Yeah.
beyond what just the scripture says in English. In English, you don't get any of that stuff.
Hmm.
But it seems like like a lot of times in English, you're left thinking, well, Aaron doesn't deserve anything, and or well, Moses broke the tablet, so why why would God do anything he says after he broke his tablets? But
Well,
then,
I mean, yeah, the thing about it is, and you can look at all these characters, that the main characters, they're all bad, dude. Like they all do so much
yeah,
just things that if we did it today, you would just be labeled the worst kind of person and you would never come back from it.
there's just a richness of material to the Old Testament that I don't think I ever knew was there. Just reading the story doesn't mean anything. The Sunday school version of it doesn't mean anything without the context and the diving into it. Like you can't know any of it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because it just, the more you read, the more you want to know, the more you want to ask. So I've got a table of contents that I added to this. Basically, there's a feature on Google Classroom or Google Sites that allows you to create a table of contents of all your titles. So all the titles going through here, if we click on any one of these titles, it'll take us straight to that part. So that's a cool new feature I'm adding. And I kind of made a list of kind of priorities of where I wanted to get. And I tried to put the ones that were less important down towards the bottom. But of course, there's so much information, it's hard to know where to start. I did want to start with something that I heard someone on TikTok say. I didn't agree with everything he was saying, because after doing my own research, I didn't feel like everything he said was accurate. But he did say something that I thought was a good takeaway. He said, and I didn't spell this right. It's supposed to say, if God takes it away from you tomorrow, are you okay? If not, you found identity in it. If you found identity in it, it has become your idol. And I think that, and in studying what it means to have an idol or to be idolatrous, it can mean a lot of different things. And I think people tend to say, I mean, in one context, you could say it means worshiping statues. And then in another context, people say it's your cell phone. And I feel like people, like the goalpost is moving on that topic. But whenever I think about it in this way, I can see why people would say it's your cell phone. Because it could be anything. Even the fact that I'm like, what I'm thinking about is using my computer all the time. I used my computer to create lessons for school. I use my computer to create a future career for myself with the whole boxing thing. Now I'm using the computer all the time in order to find God. And it seems like, if my computer was wiped out and I didn't have my computer anymore, would I be okay? And I have found an identity, like Kit Coffin is the computer guy. He is the guy who makes logos. He needs his computer in order to do what he does. So would I still be the same person if I didn't have a computer? And that's something that I got to think about. I know I would be. I'd be fine. I've reached a point in my life where I would just, move on to something else.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know if that would always, that's probably not the reaction I always would have had. I know for a fact there's been times where people would come over and want to talk to me, and I was too busy working on boxing stuff to talk to them, and I was probably rude to them. Not to say that I shouldn't have been, because they were probably drunken and making fools of themselves, but I do regret lashing out. I know there's one time in particular where I lashed out at people because my identity was so wrapped up in the possibilities of what was going to happen with this boxing thing. It was going to be so big that I was willing to be rude to someone in order to protect my idea of what the boxing organization was all about. And I don't know. I'm not sure anything should have been so important to me that I was rude to someone about it.
Yeah, and I mean, was all that work that you did it end up being fruitful, for the boxing deal? I guess that would be the question.
It's one of those things where I'm always hoping that one day it'll work out, but not any one effort has ever been worth it.
But I'm kind of thinking along the lines of what you were first saying, that the idol worship was more seemed like it was describing the worship of these items in order to, like, as a sign of worshiping gods. Like Dagon was one of them. Did you read anything about Dagon?
The fish god.
Well, so yeah, and there's some differing theories about what type of god that Dagon was, but
Well, I almost wish I would have taken. I've got a series of pictures I want to show you, and I wish I would have actually captured the. I might have done it with. I probably did do it without realizing it. Let me just go down here and.
But it sounds like these people.
Slideshow.
Yeah, it sounds like the people back then, they had a different, and then there may be still people like this today, but they just had a totally different concept of the way that God operates in our lives than we do. Like their connection with God was through, these items, I guess, these things that crafts or whatever, these sculptures and stuff they were making out of wood or gold or silver or whatever the material was, but they were using that item. It's like we talked about before, if we just took a cross every time and set it up and then got down on our knees and worshiped, or prayed to that cross, that seems kind of like what it's describing that God didn't want.
Yeah, he specifically said it many times. I don't.
Yeah.
That's why I look. Are you seeing this picture I got on the screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
I mean, why would you do that?
Yeah.
I mean,
that looks like it could describe, like, because they talked about making things out of the cedar was, and it seems like it was described as, these are things that you're just going to burn for heat, right? And it's going to turn into ashes, and it can't speak to you. This isn't something that can do anything at all. This thing that you're bowing down to.
Well, it's to me, it's also kind of like I had an experience where I was trying to get kids to read at Mosley, and I was playing a game, Magic the Gathering, and in Magic the Gathering, they it's a game where you have to kind of argue about what the meaning of the card is, because if someone says, "I do this to you," you got to justify the wording of the card to make sure that it does what you said it does. And if you're playing a kid, like there's a particular kid that he would try to go through things so fast you couldn't validate what he was saying. You had to go through and validate, is what he's saying actually what's supposed to happen? And to me, that was the best way to learn, because you're arguing about the meaning of words.
Yeah.
And these kids were doing it, and it was impossible to get them to do it in English class. It was impossible to get, I was their librarian, and it was hard to get them to check out a book. You couldn't do it. But I could get them to play this card game, and they would argue about the context of the language. And I was like, look, if we could get them to do this all the time, I think it would help with their reading scores. And so I presented it to the school board as a reading program. And one of the parents looked up, just did a quick Google search on Magic the Gathering, and found that it was evil. There was a story, and I did a Google search to see what she might have been talking about. And there was a story about how someone had burned the cards, and the smoke came up in the form of a demon above the cards.
Oh yeah.
And my question for this person was, who is giving the cards power? Because I'm saying it's a reading program, and you're saying it's got demons in it. So who's actually giving this inanimate object power? Is it me, or is it you? And I think the person saying that it's got demons in it is the person who's giving it power, because I just said it was a reading program.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing with Harry Potter. If you say it's just a movie and it's no big deal, are you giving it power, or is the person that is saying that it is evil giving it power?
Yeah, exactly.
So here you got a picture of Mary, Saint Mary, and these people are carrying a golden statue on their shoulders.
Yeah.
I noticed they're also wearing ornaments, all these ornaments, which is something that I wanted to read eventually. I was just reading about how they cast out all their ornaments. This is probably the picture I was looking for. You were talking about Dagon, and the Pope wears a Dagon hat. It looks like a mouth of a fish.
Yeah.
And that's that's the reason I was trying to look at this picture in the first place, but I don't see his hat in it.
Well, I guess it was the was it the Canaanites that worshipped Dagon, and it was the Philistines that had, the Dagon idol and everything. And there was somewhere where it talked about they had overtaken Israel, and they captured the Ark of the Covenant, and they set up the Ark of the Covenant with their idol, with their God's statue. And then the next day they came back, and their statue was laying face down on its face because it was sitting next to the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, I remember you saying that a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I just came across that one.
Here's something that I'd like to do more looking into. It said, this is just a meme that I looked up, and one of the things I was watching about the golden calf led me to thinking about the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
I mean, this specifically is what God said not to do. Do not use pagan gods in order to worship me.
Yeah.
And this is a pagan, old pagan symbol, the evergreen tree.
Yeah.
And we use it to worship God. And like I've talked about with Robert a couple of weeks ago, Robert says, well, it shows we conquered those people. that God defeated their religion. But
So now we can hang God all over their stuff.
well, he specifically says not.
That's just like the opposite of what I just described about the Philistines taking the Ark of the Covenant and putting it next to their God so that they could act as if, they captured, something symbolic of the Jewish religion and placed it next to their God as if now their God owns it.
Right, and what I heard an analogy to it. Imagine you are in a marriage, and the husband is a drunkard, and he cheats on her all the time, and eventually she breaks up with him. She finds God, gets a new husband, and she decides she wants to get married on her husband the day she got married to her ex-husband. Would that make the new husband jealous? And then whenever it's his birthday, she wants to celebrate she wants to celebrate your birthday on the ex-husband's birthday.
Yeah.
And that's the same
Right.
thing. That's the same thing as worshiping Jesus on the holiday of Saturnalia.
Yeah, that was set up for a different God.
Right.
Yeah.
Would that make you jealous? Some of these things got cut off.
Well, I mean, it's so important, like the whole idol worship thing, whatever it is. I mean, it's so critical in like the destruction of Israel at certain times, or the destruction of their enemies, because of their idols and things like that. Like I was reading, who was it? King Saul, when they first had a king that united the nations, it was Saul before David became king. And he basically lost his position as the king because the Lord was upset that he didn't utterly destroy all of the items from the Philistines, their enemy, because they had idols, and everything that they had, even their sheep and their oxen, were to be destroyed because it was just remnants of that society that had worshipped something else.
I think one of the most shocking things that I read, I've never heard before, and I read it 3 or 4 times before I finally found it in the scripture. I'm going to go all the way back up here to the top. And what happens after that golden calf thing? I'm just going to read this whole deal here. But the part I want to get to is what happens before the covenant is renewed, the command to leave Sinai. All right. And Moses said to Aaron, what did this people do to you that you have brought such a great sin upon them? And Aaron said, let not the anger of my Lord burn hot. You know the people, that they are set on evil. For they said to me, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. So I said to them, let any who have gold take it off. So they gave it to me and threw it in the fire and said, out came this calf. And when Moses saw that the people had broken loose, for Aaron had let them break loose to the derision of their enemies, then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, who is on the Lord's side? Come to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered around him, and he said to them, thus says the Lord God of Israel, put your sword on your side, each of you, and go to and fro from gate to gate throughout the camp, and each of you kill his brother and his companion and his neighbor. And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and that day about 3,000 men of the people fell. And Moses said, today you have been ordained for the service of the Lord, each one at the cost of his son of his brother, so that he might bestow a blessing upon you this day. To me, that's shocking.
Yeah.
That he wanted them to just go kill their brothers and their neighbors.
Yeah. You see that happen a lot of different times.
I don't. It's hard. That's hard to reconcile that in your mind. That a loving God would want you to go murder everybody. And you could see why people are against religion, because still till today, someone back in the 1800s could go and just, like, it's kind of like John Brown in Kansas, Bleeding Kansas incident. He just went around just murdering everybody because they believed in slavery. He felt justified in his killing in the name of God. The next day, Moses said to the people, "You have sinned a great sin. Now I'll go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Alas, this people has sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now if you will forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written." But the Lord said to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. But now go. Lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I will visit their sin upon them." Then the Lord sent a plague on the people because they made the calf, the one that Aaron made. So it seemed to me like he's saying, go to the promised land. But then he turns around and gives them a plague. The people so is it just the Levites that he says? Yeah, he says have them go. So just the Levites go. And another thing that a guy was pointing out was right here. It says, well, somewhere in here, which I'm sure we'll get to it in a second. It says your gods, and he asked the question. Oh, here, because of time constraints, I'm just not able to find it real quick. But anyway, it says whenever he makes the golden calf, it says your God. These are your gods. And he asked the question, who's saying your? Because shouldn't they be saying our gods? And what this rabbi was explaining, that whenever the Israelites left Egypt, it wasn't just them that left. There was a lot of Egyptians that went with them. So there's
really?
a lot
I mean, is that like a theory or
that's what I say. I don't know where some of these Jewish rabbis have a lot of the story that they're putting in, that I don't know where it comes from, because I don't see it in the scripture. But they're inferring, like, there's basically what he's saying, every word is in there. Every word of the book is perfect. And so if you see a mundane word like your, and it doesn't quite make sense, you got to study and look at commentary to figure out why they're saying it that way.
Yeah.
And what he's saying is the reason why they're saying your is because these people, it's a multitude of people talking here. And the Israelites are asking, "Hey, where's Moses at? We don't know if Moses is going to come back or not. We need to find a replacement for Moses." And so they ask Aaron, "Will you find us a replacement for Moses?" And according to them, Aaron is not just following through with what they're saying. According to them, he's trying to slow down the process by saying, "Give me your wives and your children's earrings and necklaces." He didn't think that they would do that, but lo and behold, they gave it up. And then they're all wanting to make this golden god, And he says, let me take it on as a personal project, thinking it was going to take him a while, because he knows Moses is supposed to be back in 40 days. And on the 39th day, these people are all asking where Moses is at. And so he's trying to buy time, is what they're saying. And he never intended it. They asked for a replacement for Moses, and they asked for a God to go before them. And Aaron tries to kind of justify things to Moses, saying, I just put the gold in the fire and out came this calf. I didn't try to make the calf. It just happened that way. And basically and here it is right here. So they gave it to me and I threw it in the fire and out came this calf. So he's not claiming that he's not claiming that they were trying to make God statues to false gods. He's claiming that, because it says right here, I'm never able to find what I'm looking for when I want to find it. But basically, he says to them that that he wanted that they were trying to find a way to worship with God, to be with God.
Yeah.
And they weren't trying to make a false God.
Yeah.
And he maintains that wasn't his intention, but that's how it ended up. When Moses went up to Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments, he left the Israelites for 40 days and nights. The Israelites feared that he would not return and demanded that Aaron make them a God to go before them. Aaron gathered up the Israelites' golden earrings and ornaments, constructed a molten calf, and they declared, "This is thy God, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt." Now, see, this is the problem that right here, I get different translations. Sometimes it says, "This is thy God." And then if you read like the English Standard Version, it says, "This is your God," which has a completely, and the rabbi talks about, "This is your God." So some of these translations completely obscure some of the details that really tell you what it's all about.
Yeah, and I was reading in Isaiah 44 kind of gives you the mentality too of what these idols meant to, not only to the people who were worshiping them, but to what they meant to God, which was nothing.
Well, you can see right here what it meant to Aaron. It says, Aaron built an altar before the calf and proclaimed the next day to be a feast of the Lord. So he's going forward with a feast to Yahweh, believing that this calf is not a false god, but it is
that was their connection. That was their connection to God through the calf.
Which,
so that's why
right back down to this.
So if you think about it, like it's kind of like their idol was in place of Jesus. Because really we're supposed to turn our eyes onto Jesus as being our connection to God, our intercessor to God, that's who we bow down to and speak to in order to be able to know God.
So I'll say again, I think that holding your cross and praying to your cross or praying to the cross at the front of the church is specifically what he's saying not to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I if you want to, Isaiah 44 is a really good chapter to start on, where it's describing God's frustration with these idols, and it goes into a lot of explanation in that one, and then the next few chapters. I mean, it's completely surrounded by the ideas of graven images too. We haven't really talked about that word graven image, to describe an idol, because people tend to think that they're synonymous with one another. Have you done much thought about graven images?
Yeah, I've got a whole section on here about that.
Do you?
Here's this is just out of the Strong's Concordance. Isaiah 45:20 is what comes
45,
up.
yeah, see, it's right there after 44. And like I said, 44 and then the next few chapters. And it looks like this is prophetic. And that's why I just realized when I said that about these idols being something that was in place of Jesus as an intercessor to God, because it sounds like this is where, Isaiah's giving prophecy about Jesus in this part about their idol worship. Go ahead. 45 what?
Isaiah 45:20. Assemble yourselves and come, draw near together, you survivors of the nations that have no knowledge, who carry about their wooden idols and keep on praying to a God that cannot save.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I said, it's like there's this whole few chapters right in here is just packed with stuff about that.
What is this right here? This is a wooden idol of Mary.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my mind around, if any of these people have read the Bible, why they would do that. And it's kind of like,
yeah,
right off the bat, and it's hard to wrap your mind around these Egyptians. It keeps saying over and over again, the people that I've led out of Egypt. These are the same people who are camped underneath a mountain where God talked to them directly, and there's like a giant cloud at the top of the mountain, and God is talking to
like
them,
where they were afraid, like they literally saw him and they were afraid, and they were begging Moses to be like, please just tell God to tell you, and so that we don't have to be afraid of him.
And this is just a month later.
Yeah,
only a month has passed, and they're already making idols.
Yeah.
So it should be no surprise to us that European Gentiles would make the same mistake, because these people made that mistake only 30 days later after seeing God directly. So back to what you were just asking me about with the images.
Graven image.
Let's go back up to my table of contents and click on the one that says what the Bible says about image. Okay, the word image is translated from the Hebrew chelem, which means shape, resemblance, figure, or shadow. There's nothing abstract in it. This same word appears in Genesis 5:3. And Adam lived 130 years and begot his son in his own likeness, after his own image, Chelem, and named him Seth. Adam lived 130 years and begot his son in his likeness, after his shape, his resemblance, after his figure, after his shadow. Absolutely no one argues anywhere about the meaning of image here. There is nothing abstract. Even as the animals reproduced after their kind, so did Adam and Eve produce after their kind. What they reproduced was in the form and shape of Adam and Eve. It was in their image. Yeah. Only when we apply this to God do people begin to question all the assumption that God really does not have any shape. They claim that a human-like appearance is something that he uses only when convenient. However, that is not what the Bible testifies. If we desire to be accurate with the scriptures, we must be consistent with the way the Bible's writers use these words. The same word is used of Adam and Eve as it is used of God. God uses the word in Exodus 24, Right in the second commandment, you shall not make for yourself carved images, chelem. This is the same word as in Genesis 1:26. Does not anybody contend that these carved images do not look like eagles, dragons, snakes, or men or women? No, the image, the idol, looks like, resembles the shape, the form of what is being copied from. We also find this word in Leviticus 26:1, Psalms 106, and Isaiah 40:18. The word shalom appears 7 times in the Old Testament. And even the liberal interpreter's dictionary of the Bible, which goes to great lengths to avoid saying it, admits that the concrete form and physical resemblance must be considered for Genesis 1 through 26. Perhaps we may conclude that while much of the thought that there is an external resemblance between God and man may be present, Ezekiel, who was a priest, has it. Scripture cannot be broken down. It does not contradict itself. The editors of the Bible dictionary have to admit that shalem carries the meaning of a concrete form and physical resemblance. Man looks like God. Continuing the quote, however cautiously he states it. One of the 4 groups who are critical, let's see. P stands for priestly. One of the 4 groups who critical scholars believe edited the Bible seems to have reached a measure of abstraction. The editors of the dictionary Bible are sneaky. Well, maybe there is a concrete resemblance, and we know that Ezekiel has it, yet the fellow who wrote Genesis 1, perhaps he reached a measure of abstraction. How hard they find it to give up their assumptions. The same internal consistency happens with the word likeness, which translates to the Hebrew word demuth, meaning model, shape, fasten, similitude, bodily resemblance. This is the book of genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness, demuth, of God. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness, demuth, after his image, and named him Seth. If demuth is used for God's creation of man in his image, and then it appears in Genesis 5:1, do we not have to apply the same discernment about what God intends? Demuth also appears in Isaiah 40:18. When we study the whole subject, we begin to understand why interpreters' dictionary of the Bible had to write that Ezekiel showed man a physical resemblance to God. So I think what they're trying to talk about here is, does God look like a man?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it, right? I mean, you have to try to understand what Adam was, his creation. And that's the thing too, God's talking, he's talking about these idols that we've made and that we've formed and everything. And God's like, I've formed everything. I formed you like a living person, as if it were the clay, So I don't know what image means. And then to try to understand what graven image means is probably even more difficult.
I saw a deal where it was talking about how all creatures have eyes, mouth, nose, and I've seen some near death experience videos where they talk about even without their body, they can smell and they can see things and they can hear things. So they still have their senses, even though they don't have a body.
Yeah.
And this
and that was
even the dinosaurs had mouths and noses and eyes.
We were talking about in 6th grade science the other day. Well, it was covering or was it 4th grade? I can't remember. Anyways, we were talking about the properties and the patterns of waves. And and then I got to talking about what I thought was weird about, like, light waves, for instance, or whatever. But the fact that, well, right now, like, you and I know you're there, right? Like, I know that if I got in right now, if I got in my car, I drove over to your house, I could find you sitting in your chair in front of your computer right there, right? And I could come up and touch you and everything, right? And somehow there's all these waves that are getting to me to tell me that. And they're coming into my eyes, right? And the senses of my ears and whatever that goes into my brain for me to have interpret that there's something outside of my body, and but that, and then that goes back to like turning our eyes on Jesus, like he's the light, right? Like that's where, like you were talking about your computer being an idol or whatever, but if you're looking for whatever it is outside of you to be something that has to do with Jesus, I guess then that would be the goal, right? To focus all of your senses on that.
Yeah. So
I guess if you could think of it, take anything that's taking away your thoughts of Jesus, right? Or truth, then that would have to be an idol.
yeah, I don't think I currently have an issue like that, but I can see it in my past where I probably fell into that category.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have, if I smashed my computer right now, I think I would be fine.
Yeah. I mean, you could, I guess, ask the question of anybody, okay, why are you not focused on Jesus right now? Well, I'm too busy with work, or I'm on drugs, right? Or I'm having a hard time with my relationships.
You keep hitting topics that I wanted to cover. For that, actually, the original thing that I showed, the first image up here, where it says to be with me. It reminds me of a conversation we had a few weeks ago when we were talking about Adam and Eve in the garden. Whenever the original sin that God recognized, he comes to talk to them in the garden and they're hiding from him. And they're ashamed because they're naked. And God says, "Who told you you were naked?" And so, like, the original sin that started everything off was the fact that they felt separated from God. And this sin of making a golden calf, the reason why everyone needed to be murdered, apparently 3,000 of them in one day, was because the sin, it wasn't that they were making other God, they were making statues to other gods. It's the fact that they felt separated from God, even though they just talked to him and he said, "Hey, I'm in your life." They all thought that they were separate from him and it wasn't working in their life, and that they needed some kind of thing to get to talk to God.
I mean, was this idol worship thing prevalent all the way up until Jesus? Because I know, it was all the way through Kings. You can see the up and down roller coaster ride of, the Israel with their kingdoms. It would be like, oh, he was evil in the sight of God because he went, started worshiping idols or whatever, right? And then he died, and the next king came along, and he was good, and he destroyed all of the idols, and that prospered.
It even goes to people thinking that you have to go to church in order to be with God. It's not really that much removed to have the attitude where if you don't go to church, you can't experience God.
Yeah.
It's not really that much different, really, when you think about it. So people need to be careful in how they word that, I guess.
Yeah, you really just need to have a Bible and be able to have literacy.
Yeah, for sure. It's all I see is my whenever I'm studying all this, all I see is my inadequacy, because it's impossible for me to, I mean, it's not impossible, but I I would like to see a day when I could tell you the scriptures from heart. I mean, that'd be amazing if I got to that point. But it's so much information to wrap your head around, to be able to pull out, say which scripture these Old Testament things came from. My mind, I'm so ADHD that I jump from thing to thing, and it's hard for me to concentrate on just one thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind going back and doing like a character study of, again, we haven't done a character study in a while. And then we can find elements of all of these overarching topics within that character probably at some point too. I think if we kind of just go back and forth, I mean, it's just gonna, it'll piece together. If, as long as we're seeking, we're gonna find whatever knowledge God wants us to have, I guess.
I've got one thing I want to say here before I jump up to talking about the Torah as a whole. So I just want to read this out loud. It's about not worshiping that cross or the Bible, but the God who empowers them, I guess.
Yeah.
At the same time, Christian thought has insisted upon the principle of mediation and has rejected the charge that attachment to mediating agency is automatically adulterous. The Christian scriptures are called the Holy Bible, not because they have an intrinsic holiness or are themselves the source of such holiness, but because God, who alone is holy, mediated and disclosed to humans through the word of the Bible. Christians are not in agreement about the agents of mediation, e.g., the role of the Virgin Mary and the other saints. But where such mediation is acknowledged to be present, it is also acknowledged that reverence shown towards it applies not to the agent of mediation in and of himself, but to the one for whom the agent stands. A special instance is the human nature of Jesus Christ, which is worthy of divine worship because of its inseparable union with the second person of the Holy Trinity, and the consecrated host in the Eucharist, which may properly be adorned because it has been changed into the very body of Christ. Although the accusation of idolatry is thus a part of the polemic in Christian against Christian, so that Protestants are accused of bibliolatry and Roman Catholics of Mariolatry, and fundamental meanings of the term is the direct moral corollary of the Jewish Christian avowal of the oneness of God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord of God is one Lord. And so they are saying that it's a sin basically to bicker about the different ways people worship. But at the same time, God told us a very specific thing not to do when we worship. So I think it's very important. I think with that in mind, I think the most important thing is this image right here I keep coming back to. You shall not make gods of silver to be with me.
Yeah.
And that word, to be with me, if you're not reading that translation, then I could see how all of this would go right past you. And looking at this picture, I don't see how you could look at this right here and say that these people are not making molten images in order to worship me.
Right.
Even if, I don't know, even if you could semantically talk your way out of it, why do it? It's too close to what he said not to do.
Yeah.
All right, I want to switch now to this is the original thing that I started looking at. This guy is Tim Mackey. He's a skateboarding preacher, and he says he grew up skateboarding, and the Catholic Church had a skate park they built, and they had a rule that said you can't skate at our park until after the sermon's over, and you have to sit in and listen to the sermon before you're allowed to skate. And so everybody sat and watched the sermon before they were skating, and apparently he picked up some things because he's a preacher now. So in this picture here, you can see, what do you see when you look at this picture here? Can you see it very well?
So like a collage, isn't it?
Let me try to open it bigger. So you see all these animals, right?
Yeah.
As you start to zoom out, you can see more of the picture. And then eventually, when you zoom all the way out, you can see the image of Christ. This is a metaphor he's using to understanding the Old Testament, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. And it's exactly what we've been talking about for the last 5 weeks. Our research has led us to the shadow boxes. We kept talking about the metaphors, the shadow boxes that point to Christ, telling us that this is all one book and that Jesus was fulfilling the Old Testament. And when I'm reading the Old Testament, up until we started the Tabernacle of Truth, I did not understand the Old Testament at all, I would say. And reading individual stories, each little piece is kind of like this looking at this picture. You hear the story of Moses, then you hear the story of Hezekiah, then you hear the story of Jeremiah. And individually, you don't see like an overarching picture. But as we start to listen to all of it and put it together to where you're reading the whole thing, you start to realize that it's all about Jesus, the second covenant.
Yeah.
Making a new covenant. Even when Moses broke the tablets and God said that he would make a new covenant with them, that's pointing to Jesus. Whenever Abraham is about to kill Isaac and a new lamb shows up, a year-old lamb shows up, that's pointing to Jesus.
Yeah.
And unless you read the whole thing and look at the whole thing as a group, you can't see the picture. All you see is these little animal pictures.
Yeah. And then the amazing thing that I was saying before is with all of the different translations that have come from the root language, it still all ends up with the same message, no matter how you read it.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, even if you took the even if you put it, sometimes we gripe because without a certain word, the context isn't there.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, sometimes you could interchange the word with another word and you would still get the same meaning.
Yeah, eventually, combined with everything else.
Here's some modern day takes on idolatry. Here's some symptoms of idolatry. You're crushed when you don't get what you want. You stake your happiness on getting what you want. You grumble and complain when you don't have what you want. You demand what you want.
I think that's describing more like envy. And I think that's where people become lost, is that I think we all, like, how we have this law written on our hearts. It describes that we're supposed to have, God's laws inscribed on our heart, and doesn't necessarily need to be inscribed on a stone tablet, but that sounds more like envy to me. But I think when we talk about idolatry or graven images, deep down at the core of our understanding of it, we know it's just a basic idea of, yeah, worship, like just focusing our lives on something other than God. Maybe you're a Dallas Cowboys fan. That's all you can think about.
Right. I did see some people that were talking about how Baptists are notoriously big, football fans, and how that can become a supreme thing that consumes their life. They know that they're not worshiping football, but at the same time, it may keep them out of church on Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, but see but those symptoms of idolatry, that just sounds like envy to me.
Well, in what way is football envy?
No, those ones you just read.
Yeah.
Like you're crushed when you don't get what you want. Because you want the nice car that your neighbor has.
Coveting.
Yeah, covetousness.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that it's that for sure. It says,
I don't know, like maybe, could it be like even what do you call it? The global warming thing. We're looking to science so much and to all of these graphs and calculations and this and that. Because there was something I was reading and it was talking about these people who are able to look at the stars, and they can tell you the future, or they can tell you signs or something from the stars and astrology and all that. And he's like, none of that means anything when it comes to what God can do.
Well, this is kind of right. The idols are terrible masters. They demand love, thoughts, affections, time, dreams, and desires, but they never satisfy, never deliver as promised. Idols always leave us in a state of discontentment. And that's one problem with, even if God did make the signs and the stars, and maybe there is something to the fact that God controls us with them somehow, with the planets or something. Well, the problem is, if you try to figure out what the message is, you could be wrong. Yeah. Anytime you're trying to be an oracle of the future, anything that you read could be taken two ways, and depending on how you interpret it, you could be completely wrong, which leaves you with dizzy discontentment. This is one meaning that I thought was interesting. I'm looking at Genesis 21:9.
Okay.
When Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, so Hagar is Abraham's first wife. No, Hagar is Abraham's second wife. Sarah's his first wife.
She's the handmaid.
Yeah.
Hagar is the handmaid, isn't she?
Yeah. So Sarah saw her son of Hagar, saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, playing or doing idolatry with Isaac, her son. So these are stepbrothers. And the Egyptian stepbrother is playing or doing idolatry.
Where does it say that?
Genesis 21:9.
Well, it says here, mine says, which she had born unto Abraham mocking.
Right. And I see that here, mocking her son Isaac. So does that mean, because depending on what translation you're reading this from, so some of them say idolatry.
Yeah.
And it leaves you with the idea of like, is mocking someone idolatry? Is playing idolatry? So, or are they saying that she is by mocking him, she's creating a likeness of him?
Huh. She's creating an image
like
of
she's
him.
doing an impression of him.
Her own image of
Maybe
him.
she's doing an impression of him.
Yeah.
By mocking him. She's mocking him by doing an impression of him.
Right.
So I thought that was a kind of a weird way to use the word idolatry.
Yeah, I mean, because it's kind of like at the the heart of it, it's kind of the same thing. An idol is something that mocks, or God would consider it mocking him.
But it also could be the word shadow, because we talked about how idol could mean a shadow. So like mocking someone, you're shadowing their movements.
Yeah. Mimicking or
mimicry, yeah. And they rose up, here's Exodus 32:6. And they rose up early and offered burnt sacrifice and peaceable sacrifices, peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink. And then they rose up to play or to scorn, for idolatry is scorning of God. So they rose up to play.
Idolatry is the scorning of God. What is that? Exodus 32 and
that's twice they use the word play to talk about idolatry.
Exodus 32:6. And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play.
Or to scorn is what this translation says. For idolatry is the scorning of God.
And the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play with their burnt offerings.
To not include God in what you're doing is what I get from that. To just do, because idolatry also can mean something, an idol can mean something that is worthless, not worth anything. So if you get up and you do things, like for instance, they talked about like while they're eating and drinking, they're in the middle of a meal, and instead of thanking God, they're all like getting up and yelling and talking during the meal.
Yeah.
And they're boasting and they're fornicating, slapping girls on the butt, things like that. That's idolatry, I guess, because it's worthless activity. Leviticus 26:1. Ye shall not make to you an idol and a graven image, nor a carved image. Neither ye shall raise up titles, that is, altars for idolatry. Neither ye shall set up a noble stone in your land, that ye worship it. For I am the Lord God. A noble stone. That reminds me of down in Mecca, they have the big black rock that they all walk around in Mecca. The Muslims, which they too would believe. This is the reason why Muslims do not. This is interesting. Muslims don't portray any kind of humans in any of their art. If you look at mosques, it's all geometry and it's floral patterns everywhere. They don't believe in portraying any humans or animals or fish or anything like that, because God says not to. But I wonder why they. I'm assuming that they don't believe that noble stone was set up. They believe it fell from heaven and landed there. So I guess that's their out on worshiping a stone. Judges 2:17. But they would not hear them, and they did fornication, that is idolatry, with alien gods, and worship them. I was wondering why the word fornication was mixed with idolatry here. And
which verse?
Judges 2:17. But they would not hear them.
Yeah, they went
did
a whoring.
fornication.
Says they went a whoring after other gods. Yeah, on King James Version.
What does a whoring mean?
Same, yeah, I mean they went fornicating or
Well, does that
to
mean
other
that they were
gods.
having sex with other gods?
No, well, it's just that God basically, his jealousy is described in that way. Whoring, you know what I mean?
Soon they forsook the way by which their fathers entered, and they heard the commandments of the Lord, and did all things contrary. But they would not listen to them, and they did fornication, that is idolatry, with foreign or other gods, and worshiped them. And soon they deserted the way by which the fathers went, and they heard the commandments of the Lord, but they did all things to the contrary. This is one thing that Tim Mackey was trying to get across with talking about the 5 books of the Bible, is everybody thinks of the 10 commandments as being like a burden that you have to obey, that God's a judge and he's saying do this and don't do that, and he's condemning you. But what Tim Mackey's trying to get across is how can you reconcile a God that's so strict, but yet you're calling him a loving God? And the deal is God did not create all of these laws in order to punish anyone. He kept telling them how to save themselves, and they continued to not be able to obey the laws until he sent down 630 laws.
Yeah,
there's not just 10 commandments.
It's like
there's 630 of them, and they kept giving them new laws, and they just kept breaking them. And so the whole point, just like we talked about with this picture of Jesus here, the whole point is not the fact that you have to obey all these laws. It's to show that all of these laws were faulty and that they would need a new covenant. The only way they could be saved was by having this perfect promise, and that there's no way they were ever going to follow those laws. The whole point was to illustrate no matter how many laws I give you, you're not going to follow them. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we prove it over and over again.
Like you said, everybody in the Bible, none of them follow the rules. They're all terrible people.
Yeah, I started reading more about King David, and he was like, he was a bad dude.
These are the words of Augustine, St. Augustine.
Him and Samson and a bunch of them.
A soul that turns away from you.
Even Elisha, like Elisha, when he has them 30 kids killed by a bear or whatever. You know what I mean?
I don't even remember that story. I'll have to read that one.
Yeah.
He has them killed.
He curses, like these kids they're all making fun of him because he's bald. And so this bear comes out of the woods or something, and I can't remember. He like prays that it will kill all, and it like killed all these children.
Oh,
that were terrible. Making fun of him.
That's terrible. Yeah, some of these things are difficult to like. If you're a Christian,
Moses murdered somebody,
Yeah, well, if you're a Christian that isn't willing to look into all of the Bible as a whole, these little stories could really turn you off.
Yeah.
So this is something I found about fornication. This is what Augustine said about fornication. A soul that turns away from you therefore lapses into sexual immorality when it seeks apart from you what it can never find in pure and serene form except by returning to you. All those who wander far away and set themselves up against you are imitating you, but in a perverse way. Yet by this very mimicry, they proclaim that you are the creator of the whole of nature, and that in consequence, there is no place whatever where we can hide from your presence. So I think that right there is in science. To me, I mean that in science, they're constantly trying to prove that God doesn't exist. But the more hadron colliders they create and the more molecules they try to break down, they find that they can't find any answers. And even if you're like, for instance, I was listening to a guy talking.
Or they keep proving themselves wrong.
Right. Like even like a guy was talking about the other day how there was multiple universes, let's say. And people try to say, well, that proves that there's no God because we're not centered at the center of creation. But if how did they put it? Okay. The theory about multiple universes is that the reason why everything here on Earth is so perfect and why things were able to be created here is because there's millions and millions of galaxies, and basically it had to happen eventually. We just happen to be the lucky ones, like it's a lottery, and we won the lottery by being here on this planet. And all the other dead planets were just ones that, you know, they weren't the winning lottery number. But if you think about that, think about if you had millions and millions of planets and they're all in a lottery system and we're the lucky ones, that means there has to be a system that set up the lottery.
Yeah.
Which proves that there's a God.
Yeah.
Because they all have to be interconnected in a system. So therefore, one's relation, it has to be related to the others, which that whole argument just shows that the more you try to prove there's not a God, the more you end up proving there is one. I found this really interesting, the Song of Moses. I remember you talking about the Song of Solomon, but I never heard of the Song of Moses.
Yeah, that's when I'm trying to remember when they did. Wasn't there an event that occurred where they sang the song, or this? Oh no, this was this his sister that sang the song or something like that? Or can you kind of describe what was happening to lead up to this Song of Moses?
This is in Deuteronomy. And this is, he's talking about the rock. And there's no strange God in him. So they're talking about, let me just read it. And the stiff-necked people is what led me to this. Stiff-necked people. This is the part where I was saying the guy on TikTok was talking about a stiff-necked people, and he said that being stiff-necked meant you were like your statues, that you're worshiping statues. But what I found is that actually the commentary says that they're stiff-necked because they're hard to lead, like an oxen who won't follow a path.
So yeah, okay. So right before this, in the last chapter, at the end of the last chapter, Moses is, for I know thy rebellion and thy stiff neck. Behold, while I am yet alive with you this day, ye have been rebellious against the Lord, and how much more after my death? He's saying, yeah, as soon as I die, you're gonna be even worse than you were while I was alive. Gather unto me all the elders, that I may speak these words, and call heaven and earth to record against them. For I know that after my death you will utterly corrupt yourselves, and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you. And evil will befall you in the latter days, because ye will do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. And Moses spake in the ears of all the congregation of Israel the words of this song until they were ended. So is it like, and they always say like he said the words of this song. Is it like he's saying the lyrics of a song, or like, are they just calling it a song because it's poetic, or did he sing it? You know, I don't know. Anyways, go ahead.
When we read about David, I from what I understand is he did sing it, more of like a chant that would be repeated.
Ballad or something.
Yeah. So this is the part that I thought was important. It basically talks about how the people of Israel have been riding in high places of the earth, and they have had increase in their field, and they've sucked of the honey of the rock, and they've become fat, and they're starting to become they don't need God anymore. Basically, they have taken lightly the esteem of the rock of salvation. They provoked him to jealousy with strange gods. With abominations provoked them to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not. To new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Of the rock that begat thee, thou art unmindful, and has forgotten God that formed thee. And when the Lord saw it, he abhorred them because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be, for they are very froward generation, children in whom there is no faith.
Dude, and that is like repetitive. We just see it over and over again.
Well,
And
the whole time in the
stories of
story,
the Bible.
Moses had to beg. The whole deal is Moses had to beg for God not to destroy them.
Yeah.
And this is something that I missed, I guess, when I was a kid. It seemed to me like the two covenants were far apart. But you can see that almost as soon as Moses came down off the mountain, the covenant, even before Moses went down the mountain and broke the tablets, God had already told him at the top of the mountain that your people screwed up. They worshiped a false idol before he ever even goes down the mountain. And this is something that Rabbi was saying, is that why did Moses go down and break the tablets if God already told him that his people had screwed up? Why didn't he just leave them up there? Because if it was too late, then why go down the mountain and break the tablets? And he says the reason why is because he was breaking the contract. He didn't want his people.
Yeah.
If he gave them the contract, if he gave it, like God's word is one thing, but when God writes it down and makes it into a contract, you can't get out of it. So the only way he could get out of it was to break the contract. And according to this rabbi, which I didn't read for myself, according to this rabbi, God told Moses that he was happy with him, and that's the kind of leader he wanted. Stiff-necked people. God himself gave us the label of a stiff-necked people. In the 32nd chapter of Exodus, the meaning since then has involved antagonism, stubbornness, argumentative, and going into minute detail in order to distinguish our point of view from others. The latter trait fits the conception of pilpul, which has intrigued, confused, and annoyed Talmudic scholars for more than 2 millennia, concerned with following the convoluted arguments of those who came before them. God's accusation of our being stiff-necked occurs in one of the several stories which Israelites are portrayed as anything but unified. It concerns the people's demands for idols and Moses having to persuade God not to destroy his people.
Yeah, I'm trying to find where it says that idolatry is the same thing as stubbornness. It actually says it, not exactly in that way. It's like it says, as unto kind of thing.
This is a story about Stephen, the Christian martyr, the first Christian martyr. He used this term stiff-necked when he told the Jews that they had murdered their Messiah. He said, "You stiff-necked people, your hearts and ears are still uncircumcised. You are just like your ancestors. You always resist the Holy Spirit. Was there ever a prophet your ancestors did not persecute? They even killed those who predicted the coming of the righteous one. And now you have betrayed and murdered him. For his truth-telling, Stephen was stoned to death."
Was.
God promises to guide his loved ones. He pleads with them not to be stiff-necked. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. Do not be like the horse or the mule, which have no understanding, but must be controlled by bit and bridle, or they will not come to you.
Yeah. Yeah, 1 Samuel 23 or 15:23. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. He was talking to Saul here. That was where I was telling you Saul kept all the good stuff, of the spoil, and even though he destroyed everything, he didn't do all of God's commandment.
Well, let me one more time go to this idea about, this is a hard one. Think about what this means. If you reject Christmas, that means you got to break your little girl's heart. That means you got to fight with your wife. That means you got to not go
to reject the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Does that mean you gotta go down the street from the NATO headquarters and rip one down?
God's work, I say. God's work, I say. That's insane, but yeah, I didn't even think about that, but yeah. Maybe that was a foreshadowing of.
Sometimes I think about that kind of thing, it's like, why did I do that? I don't know. Somebody noticed it though, obviously. Somebody had a meeting about it.
Yeah. But we're stiff-necked though. That God specifically said, don't use pagan gods to worship me. And we know it's a pagan tree, but we continue to do it anyway. Here's one that I wanted to read. This is the Flee from My Idolatry, Exodus 20:22 through 26. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. Speak to reasonable people. Judge for yourselves what I say. Is not the cup of blessing that we bless a participation in the blood of Christ? That it is not the bread that we break a participation in the body of Christ? Because there is one loaf, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one loaf. Consider the people of Israel. Are not those who eat the sacrifices fellow partakers in the altar? Am I suggesting that food sacrificed to an idol is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, but the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons, not to God. And I do not want you to participate with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons too. You cannot partake in the table of the Lord and the table of demons too. Are we trying to provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? So that right there says, I mean, I didn't even know it. I read this earlier and I didn't get the same thing as I'm getting right now. To me, this is specifically saying the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to participate with demons. You cannot drink of the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons too. I mean, this to me, that's straight up saying that the Christmas tree is to a pagan god, and that you cannot worship a pagan god and me at the same time. Another thing I thought was interesting right here that I just picked up.
Did you see about did you also see about the altar?
That's what I was going to say. Are not those who eat the sacrifices fellow partakers in the altar? So the tithing, this is what we talked about several times. A lot of people just can't wrap their mind around why you would murder an animal. But as we pointed out, the priests are eating those animals.
Yeah.
So it's a barbecue, church barbecue for the priest.
Did you see how he said, it says, thou shalt not build it. He's talking about his altar. Thou shalt not build it out of hewn stone. For if thou lift thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. And there was something before this, or later on, that was talking about polluting his altar. But it says that, if you use tools to build the altar, you've polluted it already. So that's besides even the whole thing about making idols out of gold and silver.
Well, that's what Aaron, that goes back to what Aaron said to Moses. In the first part, when it says he made an idol, it says Aaron used tools to engrave the image. And then when Moses asked him about it, he says, I just threw the shit in the fire and all of a sudden a calf came out. So he's playing it off like God made it, even though earlier we know that it said that he made it himself.
Yeah.
So everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible, but not everything is edifying. No one should seek his own good, but the good of others. Eat anything sold in the meat market without raising questions of conscience, for the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. If any unbeliever invites you to a meal and you want to go, eat anything set before you without raising questions of conscience. But if someone tells you this food was offered to idols, then do not eat it, for the sake of the one who told you and for the sake of conscience. The other one's conscience, mean not your own. For why should my freedom be determined by someone else's conscience? If I partake in the meal with thankfulness, why am I denounced because of that for which I give thanks? So let's say you're invited to a Christmas dinner at work.
Yeah.
If they say this is a Christmas meal, I don't know, that's kind of confusing because you're okay to eat it if nobody says anything. But if they happen to say something about it being about Santa Claus, then all of a sudden,
where are we at? What book and chapter is this?
This is a 1 Peter 4:1 through 11.
Yeah, but it looks like I see a verse 23.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Through something.
This is all part of Exodus 20, 22 through 26.
Okay, Exodus what chapter?
I believe it's, let me go back up to the top to make sure. No, this is Numbers 25
No,
Let me make sure that's right.
it's not Numbers.
Some of these commentaries give you verses
Yeah.
and then it's not part of it. In the footnotes, it says Exodus 32. No, Psalms 24 through 1. Right here in the notes, it says Psalms 24 through 1. No, that's not it.
It's
either.
all right.
Well, I'd like to, yeah, let me look into this here. Let me just do a Google search on all of this. Boy,
Looks
didn't
like
come
Peter
up with
there
come up with
again.
anything. Let's just look up everything is permissible. Oh, that's not it either. Corinthians 10:29. I mean, not your own conscience, but the other man's, for wise my freedom judged for another man's conscience. For I partake in thankfulness. Why am I slandered concerning that for which I give thanks? So Corinthians 10:29. Here's another verse from that, or this might be a different interpretation. But except for these special cases, I'm not going to walk around on eggshells worrying about what small-minded people might say. I'm going to stride free and easy, knowing what our large-minded master has already said. If I eat what is served to me, grateful to God for what is on the table, how can I worry about what someone else will say? I thanked God for it and he blessed it. Now, to me, that almost sounds like a completely different thing. Even though that makes more sense than what I read, it doesn't sound at all like what I read.
So explain what you're understanding. So King James Version says, conscience, I say, not thine own, but of the other. For why is my liberty judged of another man's conscience? For if I by grace be a partaker, why am I evil spoken of for that for which I give thanks?
Now, see, that makes more. What I first read, I didn't get that out of it.
Yeah, whether therefore ye eat or drink or whatsoever ye do all to the glory of God. So it's just saying, as long as you're giving glory to God, then you shouldn't be judged by another man's conscience about what you're doing.
Well, even like, for instance, I went to a bar not too long ago, and you know, people kind of looked at me sideways when I told them I kept talking about God the whole time.
Yeah, that blows people's mind if you do that, especially in a bar.
Yeah. And my deal is like, you're not gonna be able to take Jesus out of me today. Sorry.
Yeah.
And no matter what I did, the whole time I was there, where I was in the car, and no matter what I was doing, I kept inviting people to church tomorrow, and they didn't really want to hear it.
Yeah.
It's kind of putting a wet blanket on things, but for me, it was the only thing that was important.
Yeah, just stuff people need to know about.
Which really lets me know that I'm starting to arrive finally, because I don't know, reading the Bible. You've been instrumental in why I'm doing this, and you've seen my evolution over the past couple of months. I had I really had no idea where this was going to take me, and I didn't really have. I definitely didn't plan on becoming a devout Christian, even though, I mean, I've always been a Christian. I didn't plan on getting consumed by it the way I have. But
Yeah, we've covered a lot of information.
to me, I always feel like it's inadequate because I didn't get where I wanted to be. But to anyone listening, I can just say one little piece of it, and it'll be with them all day.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to, like, I never know on here exactly like how I'm going to cover things, or like if I'm going to say things right. But if I find that if I'm just talking freely with someone about all of this, and I just cover one brief little spot of it, they're blown away by this one little piece. And I didn't even explain it.
Yeah, you didn't even get out what you wanted to. Feel like you can't verbalize, everything that you've thought about when you've studied all of this information as well.
Well, for me, it's so, because I'm not only reading just what's in the Bible, but I'm reading all of the commentary and the definitions, and it leads me to so many connections that I don't know.
What's frustrating is when you come up, you'll come across something that seems important, and then by the time you've read more, or branched off to on a different topic, you forget about all this stuff that you thought was important at the beginning of the study.
But at the same time,
and you start to lose bits and pieces, and you feel like you didn't get it all in.
But the magic of it is, if you keep studying, eventually it'll circle back.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah, and you'll remember, and then you'll remember, and you'll get a chance to explain why you thought that was important.
For me, that's happened every week. I started off like in this week. I started off looking at the Torah and understanding the Torah, and then I started off with these definitions down here, and like what archaeology says and all this kind of stuff, and all of it ended up circling back in the end, even though I went way far off into Hezekiah and all these other things. So let's look in my table of contents and see what hasn't been covered yet. We talked about the Song of Moses. We talked about stiff-necked people fleeing from idolatry. The one thing we haven't covered yet is Easter. This is somebody's commentary. This is from Herbert Armstrong. He died in 86, and he said this in 1973. The resurrection was not on Easter Sunday. Easter is not a Christian name, but the title of the idolatrous Queen of Heaven. Here's an explanation of the true origin, meaning of Lent, Easter eggs, sunrise services. Why do you believe the things you believe? Do the things you do? The chances are you never stop to ask yourself that question. You have been taught since childhood to accept Easter as the chief of the Christian holidays. You have supposed it was part of the true Christian religion to observe Lent, Holy Week, Good Friday, to buy hot cross buns at the bakery, to have colored Easter eggs, to dress up, and to go to church on Sunday, perhaps to attend Easter sunrise service. Because of the instinct in humans, most of us believe a lot of things that are not true. Most of us do a lot of things that are wrong, supposing these things to be right or even sacred. Ishtar, the pagan goddess. What is the meaning of the name Easter? You have been led to suppose the word means resurrection of Christ. For 1600 years, the Western world has been taught that Christ rose from the dead on Sunday morning. But that is merely one of the fables the Apostle Paul warned readers of the New Testament to expect. The resurrection did not occur on Sunday. The name Easter, which is merely the slightly changed English spelling of the name of the ancient Assyrian and Babylonian goddess Ishtar, comes to us from the old Teutonic mythology, where it is known as Ostern. The Phoenician name of the goddess was Astarte, consort of Baal, the sun god, whose worship is denounced by the Almighty in the Bible as the most abominable of all pagan idolatry. Look up the word Easter in Webster's dictionary. You will find it clearly reveals the pagan origin of the name. In the large 5-volume Hastings Dictionary of the Bible, only 6 brief lines are given to the name Easter, because it occurs only once in the Bible, and that only in the Authorized King James Version translation says Hastings Easter, used in Authorized Version of the translation Pasha in Acts 12:4, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. The Revised Standard Version has substituted correctly the Passover. So the one place where they say Easter means Pasha, and if you look up Pasha, that means the Passover. So the one place they talk about Easter is the Passover, not so if you are to go Easter egg hunting, if you pay any mind to the Easter bunny, but then everything has an explanation. Like you can even say, like you said, find God in all things.
Yeah.
Well, what if you're finding God in these evil things? So is that a contradiction? Because he said, don't make a God to be with me. And then on top of that, he says, in all things, find God.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's saying we don't need anything that we make to like if we're like, it's one thing to fashion a knife, right? It's a tool or whatever, I guess, for use, but like to make something to represent God, it's like he does not like that at all.
Well, here's another thing. If you're going to be a fundamentalist Christian, you're going to be all upset with J.K. Rowling for bringing a wizard or a witch into theaters, and you're going to be upset with a librarian for bringing in Magic the Gathering as a reading program. Why would you not be upset with your children doing sex goddess rituals and looking around for eggs?
Yeah.
Seems much worse. Why are you allowing your kids to put presents underneath a Norse tree?
Yeah, and people just, they're mindlessly celebrating these holidays in that way without real there. I mean, like, and it's actually describing everything that we've been talking about, because these people, they're they're observing these traditions and doing them without ever just having the question about why, or what is it exactly that I'm doing right now by having my child put on a little, Easter outfit and run through the field to pick up eggs
And
to put in a
Easter is
basket.
classically a lot of families, Easter is the only day they go to church.
Yeah.
But
And they get all dressed. They get all dressed up in their best clothes, right?
tell me, based on what I just said, tell me who the whore of Babylon is.
The whore of Babylon.
If Ishtar is the sex goddess
Yeah.
of Babylon, then in Revelations, when he talks about the whore of Babylon, is that not Easter?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're reading again, the next time you read about the woman, the whore, the harlot in Revelations, tell me if any of this reveals anything. Because who gave us all this? The Romans.
Yeah.
And my dad always said that the seven-headed dragon was the seven hills of Rome. All right, well, we've been on here.
What?
The seven-headed dragon was Rome, the seven hills of Rome.
Yeah, that kind of thing, man. It's like people get convicted about those kind of things,
Well,
interpret-
it makes a lot of sense if you talk about, like I was listening to a conspiracy theory guy earlier that was talking about all the signs of the Antichrist, and the only thing in our society that fulfills all of those things is the Pope.
Yeah. Huh.
And he calls himself the vicar of Christ, Christ on earth. And they believe that, like in Christians believe that the Bible is the only authority, but Catholics believe that the word of the Pope is equal to the Bible.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we should wrap this up. It's been exactly 2 hours. So if someone's watching,
has it been that long? Dang.
Yeah, for someone watching this, I think 2 hours is probably as much as we can ask.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just end with where we started and then discuss what we're going to talk about next week.
Okay.
This one says, this was a guy on TikTok that I thought kind of summed up how we can look at this. If God takes it away from you tomorrow, are you okay? If not, you found identity in it. If you found identity in it, it has become your idol. So if something is so much of a part of you that you can't let it go, then it's too important to you.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. Something you can't let go.
So do we want to talk about idolatry again next week, since Mom didn't get to really talk about it? Or should we ask them all just to watch this video and then move on?
I mean, I think that if your mom has something to add to what we've talked about, then she should have that opportunity. I think we can move on.
So she also brought up hypocrisy.
Yeah, she did.
And so maybe we should just kind of recap what we talked about this week and then move into a new topic.
Hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'll have a half and half next week. We'll recap what we discussed, and then we'll see where hypocrisy takes us.
Yeah. So we've been doing a lot of studies on words, like hypocrisy or idolatry or trees or light. We've been doing that a lot lately. A few weeks ago we had done a character study on Jacob and Esau. We did a character study on Moses. So maybe we need a new category soon. Like a book, just even a book, one of the books, or
Let's do this then. Let's do a section of books. Like here, he's talking about pieces of the Bible. He's laid out a map of the Old Testament here.
yeah.
And the last book is Deuteronomy. But then after that, there's all the judges and all that.
Or, I mean, you had talked about kind of starting over. Have you thought much more about that, about going back and starting from
Well,
the
our
beginning, and
original,
doing it like a line upon line, precept upon precept kind of thing?
your original question when we started all of this, the very first question was asked, what is the gospel?
Yeah.
And so if we were going to start over, to me, that's the starting line.
Yeah. Huh. Well, let's think about it, I guess. We can stick to what we're going to do for next week. Since your mom, like you said, your mom wasn't here, and we can go ahead and cover hypocrisy, and then see if she has anything to add on idolatry, and then maybe by next week we'll have thought about it some more and kind of get some direction on what we want to do.
Yeah, I think at least recapping on what we've talked about is a good idea.
Yeah. We got the holidays, seasons coming up. Christmas is coming up.
Let's do that then. Let's since it's Thanksgiving, let's just say we did giving already. So let's do just giving thanks.
Okay.
All right. So what do you think about changing the time from